New World delayed. Let's go. New World development update. This is a dev update. Who wrote this? Let's find out. Doesn't say. Okay. Last August, we held a preview event with the goal of sharing our progress while collecting as much feedback as possible. We invited hundreds of thousands of players to experience New World. Your feedback and gameplay experiences validated our thoughts of what improvements and additions we needed to make. So, first note, public test, validated changes, validated design. Just leave it that way. Public test validation. I'm going to try to keep notes while we work on it this time. See how it goes. Since then, we've polished the combat system, added quest variety, expanded weapon and armor variety, added fishing, expanded the map to include a new region, Reekwater, overhauled our crafting system, and continued to add mid-game and end-game. Ding, ding, ding. Content. Polish, polish, polish. We've been hard at work on compelling endgame features we believe are important to include at launch. These features won't be ready for the spring timeframe that we had communicated. With that in mind, we'll release New World on August 31st, 2021. Release pushed from spring 2021 to August 2021. Let's call it 5-6 months, something like that. The stream category just chatting undersells the detail this man's about to get into. Yeah, I'm not the finest Twitcher out there. Is there a better category for this? Okay, what else? With this extra time, we'll be able to add these substantial improvements while polishing and fine-tuning the whole game before we open Aeternum's shores to the world. We'll continue our alpha in the months to come and expand testing by standing up EU servers on March 30th. Our closed beta will begin on July 20th. If you've pre-ordered, you'll have access to the closed beta test. So closed beta July 20th. That is about 4 months. Sorry, I can't add. 5 months from this day of recording. Let's watch the video. Videos are great. I love videos.
Hi there, I'm Scott Lane, Game Director on New World. I'm here to talk to you about our progress, our plans, and our launch date. So last summer we communicated that New World would launch this spring and that the team was going to focus on adding more mid and end game content. Since then, we've identified a few very compelling features that just wouldn't make that time frame, and we believe these features are going to transform the game, so we're going to take the time to add them before we put New World in your hands. New World's going to launch August 31st, 2021. This gives us not only enough time to implement those features, but to tune and polish them along with the entire experience.
Time to implement and tune and polish. Okay. Yep. All adds up so far.
Closed beta is going to be on July 20th, and I really hope some of you come take an early look at the game. I'd like to take a few minutes and share what we're going to be working on between now and launch. First, we're adding another endgame zone, Ebonscale Reach. This is a territory of lush wetlands and towering cliffs where an exiled empress is building a corrupted fleet that could be a threat to the entire world. Now on to those features. First one I want to talk about is expeditions.
Ebonscale Reach sounds like a endgame zone with a main villain, which implies the existence of a story of some kind. Back when we did the public test last year, New World was quite story light. One of those things they really needed to iterate on if what they wanted was a PvE MMO. And I'm going to comment on that in a few minutes. But let's hear what else they have to say first.
These are 5-player instance adventures into the darkest corners of Eternum, where players are going to face the most dire threats on the island and uncover more layers into the mysteries of the lore, including secrets behind the source of the corruption, the ulterior motives of the Angry Earth, and the deeper menace behind the soulless lost. So now I'd like to tell you just a little bit about Outpost Rush. Outpost Rush is an endgame mode that calls players to a primordial river basin filled with forgotten ancient technologies and hidden sources of the powerful and volatile Azoth. Here you're going to battle in 20 versus 20 teams over multiple strongholds, and you're going to use strategic resources not only to fortify your positions, but to boost your power for assaults. Expeditions and Outpost Rush are big features for us leading up to launch, but we've also made a lot of progress since the preview event. I'm sure some of you have played or seen Reekwater, an endgame zone we added. We've also added fishing, we've done a full revamp to crafting, we added hundreds—
Look at that crafting UI, ooh, so much detail.
And hundreds of weapons and gear pieces. We've really improved combat, and we've added a lot of quest variety. All of this is in direct response to your feedback from the preview. And let me tell you, there's a lot more to come.
Direct response to preview feedback. That's an important one. Keep that one in the back of your mind while we listen.
For those of you who played in the preview event, I think you're really going to enjoy the changes and additions we've made. Getting our mid and end game right is critical to the game experience, and adding new features, it takes time. At the end of the day, shipping a high quality, polished experience is our top priority, and we plan to do just that.
Thanks, Scott. Okay. So, what are we to take away from this? They're adding dungeons, good old chunky MMO content. Nothing wrong with it. It ain't broken, don't fix it. They're adding something that sounds a lot like PvP Battlegrounds. Again, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I've been playing WoW Retail a bit lately, and Battlegrounds are maybe perhaps my favorite part of it. They're just fun, easy to enjoy. They are focused on adding mid and end game content, adding features needing more time. They need time to implement and tune and polish these things. Most importantly, like I mentioned, that all of these things are direct responses to preview feedback. Okay. I like hearing all this stuff. All this sounds good. The fact that we're hearing that there is a delay is more comforting to me than seeing this game being pushed out the door. And I think I'm not the only one who thinks that. I think Amazon Game Studio also thinks that too. And I'll tell you why in a second. So yeah, like I mentioned, I got my hands on New World last year. Me and everyone else who wanted to. It wasn't special or anything. I played it for like 40, 50-ish hours, something like that. A lot for a week for me. Like major poop socking mode for yours truly. And here are my takeaways. New World has some very strong foundationals. The IP that it's chosen, despite seeming somewhat generic, actually feels pretty okay. Pretty good. It's set in 17th century New World. That's the flavor, and it has a very swashbuckling, explorative, like conquistador-esque almost kind of vibe to it. And that, I think, as far as I've gotten into it, which for an MMO is not very far, seems to work. What else? The crafting part of the game, I think, is meant to be quite important. It's hard to know how important crafting is until you get to the end game of any game. That's just the way it works. And I did not put in enough time to reach the end game of New World. Very few did during the public test. But I think that crafting will continue to be quite important. It's meant to be something that everyone engages in, rather than being like an optional thing like it is in a lot of MMOs. Next, settlements. So I understand the earlier iterations of New World, which were more based on a PvP sandbox overall design ethos, didn't used to have these factions. There are now 3 factions in the game that have been added. Along that addition comes the ability to opt into or out of PvP, so you can completely skip the open world PvP parts of the game. And it's gone from being a PvP sandbox to something that looks a lot more, as you can see by many of the notes above me, a lot more like a PvE theme park MMO. And these settlements are one of the things that feel a little more sandboxy. What they are is they give a player grouping. I think they're called guilds in New World, but I could be wrong about that. But basically the functional equivalent of a guild. The ability to claim settlements, which are the cities, and to invest and resources can be invested in these settlements to make them grow up and be bigger, and they can have different appearances depending on which one of the three factions. The company, it's called a company, that's what it is. The guild is called a company. Depending on which faction the company is within, changes the appearance of the city. Also, depending on how that settlement is progressed, resources invested, the forge upgraded, the stonesmith upgraded, all these various parts of the settlement that can be upgraded, which then benefit anyone who actually engages with that settlement. I would love to say more about settlements, but honestly, I didn't have a chance to engage a lot with them. I just know they're there, and I think they're meant to be important. And they do tie into some of the community building features in the game. Lastly, New World distinguishes itself by having an action combat kind of design. So rather than having like a tab combat or even like a soft tab skill shot kind of combat system, the whole thing is meant to feel a little bit more, and I loathe making this comparison, but a little more like Dark Souls, where your abilities are meant to have long animations with aftercasts, and there's commitment and positioning and movement, and all these things are meant to be important. The difference between playing a fully kitted character in New World, where you have 3 weapons, each of which have 3 abilities each, versus playing, like, say, a World of Warcraft character, where you tab between targets and you're juggling up to 40 skills at once, is quite different. It's a Dark Souls of MMORPGs, yes. That's what I'm trying not to say. I'm really trying not to say that. Also because I don't know a lot about Souls, honestly. I never really indulged in it. Illander says, PvE theme park will be more successful even if it's less unique. PvP sandbox MMOs are usually very niche. Yes, I think you're 100% right. And I think Amazon recognizes this too. Amazon Game Studios, my impression of all the things I mentioned to you were good. The quality was there. It felt like there were high production values. But I think that fundamentally, New World, when I played it back then, and I think even today, is a game in search of a design. It knows it wants to be an MMO. But unlike a game which has at the very top a creative visionary who's holding what it's supposed to be, that informs all the design choices. Rather, the vibe that I get from Amazon Game Studios is that they know they want to make a game that makes $1 billion. And they don't care what the game is. It can be whatever it needs to be. And they have a massive purse and a technology-focused mindset. And from my career working in software, one of the values that I've really learned the importance of, and I'm sure which we're seeing here with Amazon Game Studios, in many ways, even outside of New World, is the idea of failing fast. Essentially, Amazon Game Studios is not afraid to kill their babies. If they think something that they've made is not going to be what they want it to be, and is going to create a burden on the company long term, my impression is that they're okay with getting rid of it. Which is very different from I think what we see from most studios and publishers, where there's a kind of a sunk cost way of thinking about it. So yeah. To reiterate, Amazon Game Studios not afraid to kill New World. Killed Crucible, which we saw get released, pull back to beta, then killed. I mean, fucking brutal. They killed Breakaway, which is a game that we never got to see, but that they soft announced alongside Crucible and New World back in 2017. Maybe we saw some screenshots. I don't know. We didn't see much. And New World has gotten to a point where it's been exposed to the public and it's found enough of an audience and a direction, which is better than any other Amazon game studio has been. So I think in August, we're going to get to see the first Amazon game studio product go into the wild in a production state that we actually will get to see what their live services and methodology is for maintaining these products. And basically, my major takeaway is that if New World is a game in search of design, then and New World found a design, then delay is good. If, on the other hand, they are still hunting around for a design they like, then we're going to get another version of New World that's not finished, like the one we saw last year, or it's going to delay it again. Or option C, which we now know is totally on the table, just going to yank it. So that's my take on New World. They keep killing them before they leave the womb. Abortion Studios. Yeah. It's actually really fascinating to me. I don't know. I know that studios are always working on projects, and they quite often don't make the light of day, but I don't know a lot of studios who get to the point of announcing a game and then killing it as brutally as Amazon Game Studios has done. You know, we have to recognize that when you're making a game, you're balancing chaos and order. Chaos is like the creative process, the idea of making something new that no one else has experienced before. Order is the ability to actually organize it, produce it, distribute it, sustain it, have it make money. You need both these things. My impression with Amazon Game Studios is that they're tilted a little bit more towards the order side of things, which is, in following of a lot of companies with a very large amount of money making decisions that are creative. Look at Disney with the Marvel Cinematic Universe. They are living in a world where they have such a formula now that the need for creativity, for chaos, is not as high, and they can still print a whole lot of money. And as we see games in studios with bigger and bigger purses and more employees, I mean, it makes sense to have people be risk averse. So, yeah. As for me, personally, I like New World. But then again, a lot of games, and especially MMOs, are fun for the first 10 to 50 hours. So it's too early to tell what to think about it. But I urge you, when you see future news about this game, don't forget, it didn't know what it wanted to be at the start. It listened to the community to find a direction. And if it doesn't work, Amazon will kill it. That's the harsh truth. All right. Now for something a little more fun. This, I think, made my week, maybe even my month. Oh, I'm smiling just thinking about it. All right. So, y'all heard of Metallica, right? Rock band, really famous in the 90s, the noughties. Wrote some really incredible songs. Well, Metallica played at BlizzCon back in 2016, I want to say. They played live. And, you know, Metallica's great and BlizzCon's cool, and that's great. Well, Metallica got asked to come back and play for BlizzCon this year. But the trick is, this year, BlizzCon happened on Twitch because of COVID and the global lockdown. Well, let's see how that played out. This is For Whom the Bell Tolls. This is what was actually played on the Twitch gaming channel on Twitch. Twitch gaming has a lot of content that it kind of punts out and repeats. And it's worth saying, okay, that if you were watching on Blizzard's official Twitch channel, that you actually heard the song. And it's worth saying that if you were watching it on YouTube, you actually heard the song. But if you were watching on Twitch gaming, you heard that abomination. Which is by itself pretty funny, right? Like, it needs no explaining. But there's another dimension to it that a lot of people might not know about. So, that gentleman in the back here who's drumming, his name is Lars Ulrich. And in addition to being a great drummer for a great band, he's known for a few other things. And one of those things is being an extremely vocal enemy of file sharing, and specifically Napster, all the way back around the turn of the century. What was Napster? Well, for those who don't remember, it was essentially an early version of a way for people to pirate music easily, share and pirate music. And I think is seen by most people, with the benefit of hindsight, as a response to the fact, to the reality that the music industry did a really, really bad job actually making music available to the internet. So how much did Lars hate Napster and music sharers? Well, he hated them this much. $240p, ouch.
Hello? Hey, frat boy. What the hell do you think you're doing, man?
Holy crap! Do you know who you are? You're freaking Lars Ulrich from Metallica. I love everything you do. Well, except for that bad show you hosted.
You know what? Maybe I wouldn't have to whore myself out if you kids didn't steal my
Is that
music.
Marlon Wayans?
Whoa.
Yes, it is.
We're not stealing, okay?
Yes,
We're
it
just
is.
sharing with each other, you know?
So it's like if I take this soda can right here, take a sip out of it.
Oh, my God. I'm sharing my soda with Lars Ulrich.
Is this an SNL skit? I don't actually know.
And you know what? I'm just sharing 10 years of groupies with you, frat boy. I'm starting to like this whole sharing thing. Hey, boys!
Oh, yeah.
Hey, Bobby, some crazy roadies just stole my car.
Not the Pinto!
Napster. Sharing's only fun when it's not your stuff.
Stealing is not the same as sharing, Lars. Yeah. So that is a gorgeous, gorgeous piece of content that I'm so relieved still exists. So let's break this down. Lars Ulrich, vocal opponent of file sharing. Okay. So P2P. Peer-to-peer, we know what that means, right? Peer-to-peer file sharing. Okay. Equals member of Metallica. Well, that sketch was funny and all, and we can agree about whether the message was correct ethically. To my mind, of course, I, having lived through those years and used Napster and programs like it myself, see Napster and the things that followed it, like Kazaa and then eventually BitTorrent, which still survives to this day, as responses to an unavailability of music to be consumed digitally online. Which around that time, music files were small and it was totally possible to do, and it just wasn't possible. You couldn't. It was technologically possible, but there was no actual ability for consumers to find that entertainment in that way. Compare it to like Netflix and video. As soon as the internet became broadly capable of HD video, there were tons of services for you to actually consume stuff that way. Music could have come along a lot sooner, but it actually arrived later than video, I think. That tells you how bad it is. So people were using programs like Napster to get music because they didn't want to go to the record store and buy a CD and rip the CD to their computer, which arguably was also illegal. So what actually came of this? All right. What actually came of this is that there was a lawsuit. Let me see if I can find the information here. Lars Ulrich, DMCA. Metallica versus Napster. Yes, here it is. This might be hard to read on y'all's side. We'll try, though. Okay. So Metallica versus Napster. Metallica alleged that Napster was guilty of copyright infringement and racketeering as defined by the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. The lawsuit was filed in the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of California. The case was filed soon after another case was filed against Napster. This is more detail than we want, let's be honest. The case, the outcome. Here we go. And the bit of this I wanted to highlight was that here at the bottom, other artists, including Dr. Dre and the RIAA, have subsequently filed their own lawsuits against Napster, which led to the termination of 250,000 Napster accounts. In 2001, Napster reached a settlement with Metallica and Dr. Dre after Bertelsmann AG BMG became interested in purchasing the rights to Napster for about $100 million. The settlement required that Napster block music being shared from any artist that did not want their music to be shared. This deal was blocked when Judge Peter Walsh ruled that the deal was tainted because Napster Chief Executive Officer Conrad Hilbers, a former Bertelsmann executive, had 1 foot in the Napster camp and 1 foot in the Bertelsmann camp. Napster was forced to file for Chapter 7 and liquidate its assets. So in other words, this chain of events that Lars Ulrich was involved in eventually killed Napster. Now, I don't have the source materials for this, but I'm pretty sure that Lars Ulrich was also a big part, and this movement overall contributed greatly to the formation of the DMCA, the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, that protected artists like Metallica from copyright infringement. So, the DMCA is in the news recently because they attacked Twitch. Sorry, the DMCA is not a person. The DMCA is a law. The RIAA attacked Twitch. And this is a layman's take on this problem, where I'm just highlighting the humor in it, which I think is high. The RIAA attacked Twitch. Twitch chickened out. Essentially, rather than dealing with the RIAA and figuring out a way of allowing streamers to actually play music in a reasonable fashion. They told streamers, just don't play copyrighted music, man. Please. And now, the final result of that is that Metallica, the band with Lars Ulrich, had their own music censored live on Twitch. Lars is instrumental in the DMCA. Lars victimized by the DMCA. Anyway, that's the humor. And it's based on a lay interpretation. But man, it's pretty good. And I'm just going to put that video on one more time. Let's hear it again. Tasty karma. I'll drink to that. For whom the bell tolls, time marches on. Okay. Now, let's talk about World of Warcraft. So, BlizzCon, like I mentioned in this aside about Metallica, was this weekend. Big freaking deal if you care about any of Blizzard's properties, including World of Warcraft, Hearthstone, Overwatch, Heroes of the Storm, not so much. But games like that. And one of the things that has been hotly anticipated by the World of Warcraft Classic community was the announcement of Burning Crusade Classic. Now, of course, Burning Crusade was released in 2007, about 2 years and change-ish, if my math is right, after the original release of World of Warcraft Vanilla. It changed a lot of things. It added a new region, the Outlands, that could be explored. And it allowed paladins to be played by the Horde and shamans to be played by the Alliance. It added arenas, a more competitive PvP mode than existed previously. And it introduced a whole bunch more lore and raids and dungeons and all the good stuff you expect to see from an MMO. One of the things it also did is it killed the world buffs meta, which I think was not as important back in the day, but is extremely important now. And it introduced flying to the game, which had never existed before. Another important digression from the original WoW design document. And lastly, but perhaps most interestingly to me, is it added token drops. So previously in World of Warcraft, you killed a boss, you got a piece of armor or weapon. Now, many times you get tokens that drop, which either can be directly exchanged for armor and weapons, or if you have enough tokens, you can cash them in eventually. Essentially, it's a way of making loot a little less direct, a little more friendly, and a little less random at the cost of, a whole bunch of flavor and role-playing juice. Anyway, so it was announced. Let's watch a couple minutes of that. Oh, yeah.
Welcome, everyone, to our deep dive panel for WoW Classic.
So
I'd like to start with some introductions with these fine gentlemen with me and myself. I'm Holly Longdale. I'm the principal producer for WoW Classic. A little bit about my background. I spent 13 years working on EverQuest. I started as a game designer and eventually became the head of the studio for the EverQuest franchise. That said, I've always been a WoW player since beta. So this is obviously a dream come true for me, and I'm thrilled to be here with you.
I'm Patrick Dawson. I'm the production director for World of Warcraft. I've been at Blizzard for 15 years now, and have been on WoW for most of that time. Avid WoW player myself, and really excited to open up that dark portal again as we all step through it.
And my name's Brian Birmingham, and I'm the lead software engineer on WoW Classic. I've also been at Blizzard for 15 years. I started on World of Warcraft. I spent about 3 years on Hearthstone as well, and then came back to the World of Warcraft team to work on WoW Classic. And it has been a great joy to me to work on this team.
There's a lot to talk about today.
Yeah.
So,
All right, so now we've met them, met the key players. So I'm not going to watch this whole video with y'all. It's a bit long. We're going to boil it down a little bit, and then we're going to watch the end of it. Developers who play their own game, the dream. Is it the dream, though? I'd like to believe that. I really do. I have some, I think, quite conflicted thoughts about all the news related to Burning Crusade Classic. But I think we have to begin with seeing who Blizzard put up in front of us to talk to us about the game. Now, seeing 3 people is a lot different feeling than when they announced Classic. When they announced Classic, I'm pretty sure it was just Brack, right? It was just Brack up on the podium. And I think we probably had an engineer at one point stand up and talk about some things. It might have been Brian, actually. I kind of recognize his face. But it's important to note that the people we have here in the works are a producer and 2 technology guys. There's no one here who's a designer. There's no creative director. There's no game designer on this panel, which is interesting because we're going to be talking about some changes to the design of the original World of Warcraft Burning Crusade. Okay, so let's lay down a few bricks when it comes to talking about what Burning Crusade can be and can't be, at least in my opinion. Number 1, Burning Crusade cannot be recreated. Sorry, folks. You can't go home again. That's when Burning Crusade was released. Burning Crusade release date. This is going to be all diluted now with Classic results. So here we go. Released January 2007. So just about 14 years ago. Let's see, 14 years ago, I would have been in my mid-20s. Shows you how old I am now. I was just at the end of burning out of my college experience. I remember playing this game. I played through all the original expansions, the first 3 expansions of World of Warcraft back in the day. I was there. I was a hardcore raider. I did PvP, grinded the whole thing. I was at the right age for it, being in college, so I had a ton of time I could throw at it. But there were some things about the world that were quite different then. You know what else came out in 2007? Make sure I'm right about this first. Yeah, I am right. Yes. The iPhone was first unveiled in 2007. Now, on its own, who cares? Doesn't mean anything. But if we rock it back, it means quite a lot. So if you had an iPhone today, what would you be doing with it? Well, you could be loading up YouTube. That's one thing. You could be loading up Twitter. You could be loading up Twitch. You could be loading up Reddit. All these ways to engage with your games in a way that is not actually playing the game itself. None of that crap existed back then. I mean, YouTube was around, but this was before HD video became a thing. And I think HD video is kind of when YouTube started to turn the corner. Twitch didn't come out for another 4 years after this, 2011, and it was not popular at the time. Twitter, I think, was later. Actually, I'm not sure so sure about Twitter, but it didn't see common use among gamers. That's for sure. What I'm trying to say is that the landscape in which we game was completely different in 2007. And the amount of the people who played World of Warcraft were people who were going to stores and buying CDs and were installing them on CD-ROMs or DVDs at the time, I suppose. And were reading manuals and were building their own computers. It was a much more of a niche thing to be playing online games at this time. Because that funnel was so long, and because the tools for communicating and sharing were so primitive compared to what we have today, WoW Vanilla was not a solved game in its time. And I don't think Burning Crusade was either. The game you're going to play today, if you go play Burning Crusade Classic, is going to be a solved game. Now, the fact that they're going to be changing a few things maybe suggests differently, but I think that the changes that they're thinking about making are entirely overcomable in the grand solution by the powers of the community at this point. So, can't go home again. What else? I have spent a few months, last few months, jumping back into World of Warcraft retail to play it and enjoy it, of course. I mean, it is a good game. And to understand it. The reason I jumped in is because I wanted to figure out what had really changed in WoW retail over the years. Now, my first re-exposure to WoW recently was going back and playing WoW Classic, which is the first time I touched the Warcraft franchise since Wrath of the Lich King. I completely opted out of WoW retail a long time ago. I got my fill of WoW Classic, and I put it away. You know, I didn't need to repeat the whole raid grind. I was good. But WoW retail, to me, was something that plagued me because I kept hearing about how WoW retail had gone down the tubes and had become this very apologistic game, and that it was the result of like all these things being added that somehow diluted the fine essence of what World of Warcraft was all those years ago. And so I wanted to experience this for myself. Well, after having done so for a few months, I can come away with a few things, and I'm not going to get into a lot of detail on this because I'm going to save it for a later content drop, I think. But a few bullets would be, there have been tremendous pains made by Blizzard to make the game playable for all types of choices. That's one. So no matter how you play the game, you can play all the content. They work very hard to make as many choices valid as possible, which sounds good on the face of it. Okay? They've also diluted the power of role-playing and decision-making down quite a bit. You can change your race. You can change your face. You can change your faction. You can change your spec whenever you're at an inn. Like, there are so many things you can do to change the way you play as soon as you want. There's so much access to player choice. And what that does, when choice is simple, choice doesn't matter. Choice and consequence need to be balanced in a proper role-playing game. And if your game is all about choice and not about consequence, then you're not really making meaningful choices. You're just optimizing for whatever situation you're in. Quality of life bloat. Yes, I think that's true. And this next thing I want to say is a synthesis of a lot of things I've heard. I've listened to a lot of smart voices talk about this topic, and I think where I'm at with it today is I don't believe that WoW retail was created by nefarious Ian Hazzikostas in his back room over a cauldron. I don't think that Blizzard has some vision of the game that fundamentally diverges from what is good or what was good about World of Warcraft. Rather, I think Blizzard works extremely fucking hard to respond to their community because they understand that their game's success is based on their community's happiness. Retail was created by feedback. If you take community feedback and base the success of your game on what your players say over the course of 15 years, I think it's not unreasonable to go from something like WoW Vanilla to something like WoW Shadowlands. I think it's entirely reasonable for that to happen. This is my hypothesis, and I'm kind of testing this. Okay. So if we accept that Burning Crusade cannot be recreated, and we accept, which, let's just do this for now, that retail was created by an aggregation of feedback that over years. What is some changes? All right. Now we're going to go back to the video. We're going to be skipping to about halfway through this video to what I think is the good stuff.
So through all of these processes, yes, we're obviously we're fixing what is broken, but also we thought it was a good time to start enacting what we call #some changes.
I feel like I should mention Holly Longdale sounds like an RPG character name. I don't know why that pleases me so much.
To gameplay and
some
how
changes.
Things should work.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about it, like Classic, our guiding principle was no changes. The goal was to provide as true to life, authentic experience of Classic that we possibly could for the community, and we accomplished that. What was interesting to me is to see this vibrant community that embraced it and then said, hey, but we're not exactly the same as we were 15 years ago, right? And they're right. Like, the times have changed. The world has changed. And so some of those things that maybe were out there that were not great and were warts back in the day is not something that we would want to ship again. Like something that feels a little buggy or wrong or incorrect. So
what you're seeing here is, I think, something that's very important to take away. Responding to feedback from the players is a fundamentally compassionate act. Look at this guy. Patrick Dawson. Does he look like some guy who's trying to inflict his will upon you? No. He looks like a person who's trying to make a reasonable, trying to reasonably use the power that he has to make people who are reliant on him happy. That's what it looks like to me. Responding to feedback is a fundamentally human thing to do, that we all do. And although I think retail was created by feedback, and although I think some changes is an example of going down the same route, I'm not sure that it's either avoidable or bad. And I jumped the gun there. I wanted to save that comment for after we finish talking, but let's see what else I have to say. Listen for a couple more minutes at least.
the idea behind this is let's provide what the Burning Crusade experience was without those warts.
This really, I think, illustrates the difference is spell batching. We actually had a lot of requests originally for spell batching in that kind of no changes charge, where they said, hey, I remember when I used to be able to have two mages polymorph one another, and they would both end up polymorphed. And that's cute and fun, and I kind of like that. And so we said, okay, well, we can put that back in. But the system that causes that is, of course, that the spells are batched up and processed in these giant batches. But over the last 2 years, people realized that what that comes with is about a half a second of kind of built-in latency, where you push a button and it doesn't actually take effect for that half a second while it's waiting to queue up the other ones to go with it. And people were starting to find that frustrating. I talked to a lot of people who said they were excited about it when it first came out with Classic, but after they've been playing with it for 2 years, they're really ready to see it go, and we're ready to take it out too. So we're gonna
2 years of feedback. Something that I'm not going to play for you, but which I will reference, was Ian Hazzikostas' kind of keynote that he gave talking about the overall Warcraft IP. One of the things that he mentioned is how critical it is to get the game in players' hands at a mass level in order to get actually useful feedback. And I really sympathize with this plight. These games are not meant to be played by 10, 50, or 100 players. They're meant to be played by tens of thousands of players. And unless you have that scale of interaction, it's hard to surface some very important truths. And I think what we probably saw, and with that insight in mind, and knowing that that was how Ian and his team approached Shadowlands, I think it might be fair to apply that lens to looking at how Classic came to be what it was. Essentially, they knew there was a market for it, and they decided to do it. Whatever the reason was, they decided to do it. I think speculation on why they decided to do it is a eternal font of interesting discussion that I'm not going to tap at the moment. But once you decide to do it, the question of how becomes no changes, some changes, lots of changes, right? But fundamentally, they had not seen anyone outside of private servers, which I'm guessing Blizzard did not spend a lot of time on, actually playing this game, understanding what it is, what it does, what its problems are, what its strengths are. And after having Classic out in the wild for a year and a half, I guess it is, they actually got to get that mass feedback about what was wrong. We understand that nobody likes the world buff meta, but everyone likes finding improvements to play to their characters, so people will do things that aren't fun to get those improvements. And spell batching is one of those things. They thought no changes to spell batching because it was going to interfere with some fun interactions, but it had some unintended consequences, meaning that everyone felt laggy as fuck. So what Brian's going to talk about is essentially keeping the good and leaving the bad, which, if you ask me, sounds completely reasonable. And it sounds like exactly the thing anyone would want to do in the positions that Brian is in.
Going to remove spell batching with Burning Crusade.
That's definitely great, because I remember like every 2 weeks I'd get a bug report, Vanish is broken again. And it was because of stuff like this, right? Like if you vanish at the same time a fireball's hitting you, it's going to pop you out, right?
Exactly.
Like, and so we were trying to do all these tacky solutions to it, but the real answer is just don't spell batch.
Yeah.
But we didn't have the ability to do that then, so glad we're doing it now.
Yeah.
You know, another one that I can think of is just how the raiding community has matured, right? Like things were very different back in 2004, 2005 timelines compared to today. So, you know, the raiding community knows exactly what's going on, and they want a challenge. They want more of a challenge. So, you know, rather than always giving them like the last version of the boss, the final form of the boss, which maybe has been hit with a few nerfs, let's not do that anymore. Let's give them a more challenging version of the boss. Like, I'll give you an example of like Muru. Right, where the initial version of that boss had a lot of spell pushback, and so like that made it really tough to bring casting classes to that fight. We did fix that pretty quickly and change the fight to allow for that. Now that's a change we probably would incorporate in this, right? Like we don't want people to feel excluded or not part of being able to do a fight like that. But then probably a month or so after that, we nerfed Mover's health. That doesn't need to happen. Let's just keep it in the hard form. We can evaluate any changes we need to make after that, but yeah, it won't just be like, hey, final form, we're not even going to look at it. Let's call it a day. So
interesting. Okay, so yeah, what feedback drove this decision? So the decision is to not embrace the nerfs that were executed when the game was live in 2007 and 8. So if the decision is not to nerf, the feedback must be the content is too easy. When I was catching up on feedback for what some of the, I think, most interesting voices in the out there on the internet thought about all of this, one of the people who I listened to closely was Kevin Jordan, someone who helped develop original World of Warcraft. He worked on the talent trees, and he is now kind of a curmudgeon of the World of Warcraft social media space, where he's sitting down and basically telling gamers that they have no idea what they want and they're wrong, and all their feedback sucks. And it's great. It's beautiful. I actually love it. I completely am in love with Kevin Jordan. Um, and what Kevin said about this is that he suggested that this change of embracing a harder version of the boss is listening to loud feedback from loud parts of the community, which tend to tilt towards the overengaged, the hardcore streamers, creators, people who need 12 hours a day of content in order to keep their thing going. And doesn't it all respect the quiet, the kind of silent masses and what they might want from the content? I think the way he put it was, yeah, you can make apes clear take 3 minutes longer, but how many other people are you going to be cutting off completely from doing the content if you don't embrace those nerfs? And he's got a good point. Who are Blizzard listening to when they listen to feedback and they make changes? When they make some changes? They're listening to the people who are vocal. Who are the vocal people? Are they the ones who should be making those decisions? Kevin Jordan's take is that a designer has to listen to feedback, but not implement it. So you listen to things, you make your own decision. And one of the things that he's pointed out, which I tried to call out when I first brought up this video, is the fact that there are no designers in this discussion, just technology people and producers. Holly was a designer at one point, but that's clearly not the role she's playing here. So it seems like the classic team at Blizzard can do little but do the things that are directly asked of them or not, unless they have some design power happening in the background. And that's something that Kevin is scared of. And I think I get why.
Yeah. So how did your mage handle the pushback?
I just was sad.
It feels personal. Yeah.
Yeah. So Muru, before it was nerfed, had this annoying ass pushback mechanic on caster classes. So all heals and casts were constantly being like soft interrupted and pushed back. And it drove people crazy. And apparently they're going to implement the pushback version of the boss when Sunwell rolls around.
No, I was the raid leader, so I got to choose who went. But
The one mage allowed to go.
that was honestly, that's one of my favorite fights ever in World of Warcraft. That was a really, really fun fight.
That's awesome. Another change that we're talking about making is along the lines of that PvP balance and faction balance is, obviously with Burning Crusade, Paladins are introduced to the Horde and Shamans are introduced to the Alliance, and that was intended to be a balancing of the factions and let's, make them even. And then they wanted to kind of keep a little bit of flavor of that faction identity, so they kept Seal of Blood on the Horde and Seal of Vengeance on the Alliance. It was intended to be equivalent power abilities that were just slightly different in flavor, but in retrospect, Seal of Blood was just so much better. And so one of the changes that we are going to make is we are going to give the opposite faction's seal to the other faction, but we're going to do that at max level. So we keep just a little bit of that faction identity, where Horde will get Seal of Blood at level 64 on schedule, and then get Seal of Vengeance at level 70. And similarly, Alliance will get Seal of Vengeance at level 64, and then their equivalent, Seal of the Martyr, at level 70.
So you're going to have 6 levels of difference? It's fucking nothing. So Blizzard is reducing the consequence of your faction choice and increasing accessibility. Again, this was the retail mindset we talked about. Increase access, reduce consequence. Increase access, reduce consequence. I think when you do this, what you get is more of an arcade game than an RPG. I think this is what the Kevin Jordans of the world really freak out about. There's another 10 minutes of this. Let's listen to until we get bored, shall we?
Another thing we want to talk about is arena teams. When it first came out in Burning Crusade, the arena team system only let you have the same number of players on your team that was the size of the bracket it was for. So, for example, a 3v3 team could only have 3 players on the team. So if someone was like sick or unavailable one night, you couldn't play. And that felt really frustrating. So we're definitely going to go with like the last version of that, where you could have twice the size of the bracket on your team roster, so that you had alternates you could swap in and out. And then that way, as long as anybody had participated in, I think, 30% of the matches, then they got the full credit for the week of participation.
Yeah. So when we did personal ratings versus team ratings?
I think that came later, and we're also considering whether or not we want to do something with that as well. Because another thing that was problematic about arenas was the way that the ELO system was so inflationary. And so we're talking about whether or not we want to move forward with converting that to something more like the modern MMR system, so that it isn't as punishing to people in terms of like waiting hours for a match at the highest levels and things like that.
And another change,
the way arena teams were implemented for Burning Crusade were primordial and not good. I think the team size thing is just a net. Like, that's a good example of a good change, probably. I don't know if it's cheesable. I'm not smart enough. I'm not competent enough on that kind of content, but it sounds good. It sounds good to me, to my ears. MMR thing, I have no thoughts about. Let's see what Holly's going to say, though.
We're going to give players access to Blood Elf and Draenei early, so that before we actually open the Dark Portals, you'll have a chance to level those up. That's definitely not something we did originally.
I remember I had a friend who was really frustrated that the rest of us were all running around in Outland, and he was like, I'm still back in Wetlands. What is going on? When can I play with you guys? So I'm really glad we're doing that.
Leveling the playing field.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the plan.
Access goes up,
pre-patch will come
consequence
out,
goes
and
down.
you'll be able to go start your Blood Elves and
It's so consistent.
And then content. So we've got some phases happening.
Yeah. So the content phases that we got coming are exciting. We're gonna start with Karazhan and Gruul's Lair and Magtheridon's Lair, and we want to start with just.
I'm just pausing because seeing these is like, this is what actually gets me excited about the idea of playing Burning Crusade. Right now, I'm tilted towards not playing it. Let's be real, y'all. World of Warcraft is a serious life decision. I'm not sure if I can do it for a 3rd time. I guess a 4th time.
That released because we found with Classic that people really enjoy that kind of gear progression, and that's where all the tier 4 gear is with those raids. And we want people to have an opportunity to level up, catch up to their friends, and all kind of go through these things together. So as we unlock each chapter, we want to make sure everybody's had enough time to be part of that chapter. And the next chapter after that will be Phase 2, which will be Serpent Shrine Cavern and Tempest Keep. Then next we move on to Phase 3, which is Hyjal and the Black Temple. And the reason that's a change is, of course, originally Hyjal was available from the launch of Burning Crusade, but nobody could really get in there because of the way the attunements work. So we'll unlock that as a later chapter alongside Black Temple. And then that'll go with Arena Season 2 at that point. And then Arena Season 3 will come out alongside Zulaman with a little bit of catch-up gear for anybody who's taken that long to catch up.
What about Mustard?
It's another smaller instance, a 10-man. And then finally, Phase 5 will be Sunwell and Arena Season 4.
It's been a very busy year.
It is. It's an expansion with a lot in it. A lot in it.
And so we spent a lot of time talking about Burning Crusade Classic and Burning Crusade.
Those are fun raids, y'all. I really fondly remember Black Temple and Sunwell. I skipped Hyjal for the most part. Karazhan. Oh, such good stuff. Such good stuff.
Which is exciting. We're very excited about it, but there's a lot to talk about. There's a lot coming, and we want to walk through how this is going to materialize.
Well, yeah, really the question is, we have a diverse player base where people have a lot of different wants and needs. And how do we get there? How do we get to the Burning Crusade? Well, the first group of people that we wanted to make sure that we were serving well is those people who do want to go to the Burning Crusade. We feel that most of the community is interested in this. They're going to want to do this. We want to make it simple and easy for them. So how are we going to do that?
As we said earlier,
how are they going to do it, guys? What do you think? Should we take a vote? I already know the answer. It's a juicy one.
You're going to be able to make a choice. So we'll talk about and explore these choices in some detail, and I'll give you some examples. So to start with the current servers you're on now, classic live servers, are going to become what we're calling progression servers. And what that means is the servers that are live now will always unlock any expansion we release. So when we get to our patch day, you're going to be presented with a choice. Do you want to continue on into the Burning Crusade, or do you want to move to Classic? So in that space, you're going to do that for every single character. So for my example, I'm on Warm Rest Accord. So I've got a level 60. I am definitely taking that on through to Burning Crusade. But I've got a couple of mid-levels that I know I want to move with my friends. Those are characters I level with my friends in Classic, and I want to continue that journey with them. We want to make it as easy and seamless as possible to just get right into Burning Crusade. But there are options.
That's awesome.
Easy and seamless to get into Burning Crusade. I'm not going to write that down, but echo that. They want Burning Crusade to be easy and seamless. Easy and seamless.
Awesome. I'm excited to hear that. I know there's a lot of my friends, for example, who maybe didn't really play Classic when it first came out, right? And so now they're behind. And they're interested in playing the Burning Crusade. This was, for a lot of people, their favorite expansion that we've done. We want to make sure that those people are served too. And one of the ways we could do that is provide a boost to people who are interested in coming back, that maybe aren't interested in doing the classic WoW experience, but really want to hop right into Outland as quickly as possible. Yeah,
so the team, we spent quite a bit of time discussing it because we want to make sure we respect the time of the people that have been playing Classic for 2 years, but also we want people to be able to enjoy Burning Crusade if they loved it the first time and maybe miss Classic. So we are going to offer a level 58 boost for purchase, but it does come with some restrictions. So it's going to be 1 per account. It's not going to be usable on Blood Elf or Draenei. It'll have some dungeon blues. It'll have level 40 mount skill, no professions. It's the basics, basically your Outland starting kit.
That's cool. That's a really great way to jump into the game for sure.
Yeah, I like that.
I'll be looking forward to that. Look, I know a lot of people came back to play WoW Classic, and that's all they want. That's all they ever wanted. They're like, you know what, Burning Crusade, that's awesome. I'm sure some people are going to love that, but for me, I came back for WoW Classic. What do they get to do? What's their options?
Yeah, that was really important for us too. Yeah. So we had all sat down and discussed like how we should frame this. So when we get to our patch day, which is prior to the Dark Portal opening, when I said before, like, I'll go back to my example for Worm Rest. You
can tell how nervous people are about saying something when they add a lot of unnecessary language and qualifiers and context. And I'm the same way, to be fair. I mean, I'm human too. But you can tell they're kind of nervous about saying this. Whereas like the spell batching thing, they were just like, blah. I felt good about that. This...
we will be launching Classic Era Realms at the same time as we do our patch, and you will have that choice. So when you make the choice to go to Burning Crusade Classic, or you make the choice, like on my example, my level 40 Druid, I want to move that character to Classic Era. And what Classic Era means is that those particular servers are going to stay in that era forever. So that is going to remain Classic till the end of time. It's never going to unlock expansions. You'll be able to make that choice for every single character. Do you go on to Burning Crusade, or do you choose to go to Classic Era? Let's say, you know, you're behind the times a little bit. You'll still be able to have that choice. We haven't locked it to a time window. You're not going to miss the boat to Era.
The choice sounds awesome. And choice in WoW is something that's meaningful. It's always been meaningful.
Yeah.
And I think it's something that's important when we look at the community, that you're going to choose to go to the Burning Crusade or you're going to choose to go to Classic. You know, some people may not be comfortable with that choice. And while we think that choice is important, we also recognize that there are folks that are going to want to play both, right? Like,
there you go.
Right here. You have some stuff left to do in Classic that you wanted, and you want to keep that character in Classic, but you also are interested, that same character wants to raid with your friends.
That's exactly
right. So what does that look like? How do we make that happen?
So we're going to actually offer a paid service to let you make a copy of your character. And I know, like, a copy is a big deal. So like you said, like, this is something we don't want to make just an automatic choice for everybody. But I know that for me, it really is going to be like that pull to go to both places. So I want to be able to say, like, you know what, I'm willing to pay some money for this. I want a copy of my character that lives in Classic Era forever. while I also go to Burning Crusade with that with that character. And that way I can stay with my friends who are really excited to go to Karazhan. I'm really excited to go to Karazhan. I want to see my hunter go through Karazhan, but if I'm missing like a couple pieces of my tier 3 set from Naxxramas, I still have an opportunity to go find a new guild there and go through Naxxramas again until I finish that set.
I'm thinking, y'all, because, I mean, you probably tell I've already watched this and formed some opinions about it. But I still don't understand what the appeal of staying back in Classic is. Now, if we're talking about hearing feedback, the loudest feedback that I heard leading up to this announcement was people wanted... There was talked about like opt-in, and this is kind of like the reverse of that. It's like opt-out. But still, I don't understand what the utility of having a character that you created in Classic, of transferring that character to a Classic-only realm that's locked to Classic only. Why would you do that? Especially when if you want to keep that character in Burning Crusade as well, which everyone who's level 60 is going to want to do. Especially when I just don't get it. What I heard people wanted wasn't a Classic realm full of dead, unplayed level 60s that are rattling around in Naxxramas. What I heard people wanted was fresh Classic. They want to relive the Classic phase progression that we got in 2019 and to go back through it. They want to reprogress through Molten Core, Blackwing Lair, Encourage. They want to relive the last year and a half. I'm not one of them. I mean, I opted out of reliving it the first time. I essentially got to 60, joined a guild, and helped it kill Onyxia and Ragnaros the first time. And then at that point, I said, okay, this was a lot of fun, but I don't need to do more. And to be honest, World of Warcraft is a big chunk of my brain that I want to free up for other stuff. I don't understand the appeal of keeping a character back in Classic when it's not a fresh environment where everyone's starting off from the base. So what I do understand is creating a profit incentive. So whenever Blizzard is looking to create branches from their game, that's a serious choice. And actually leaving Classic realms up is a serious choice. I think that there's probably an explanation for this that is formed less by what people want and more by what is feasible to produce, what is like a minimum viable option. And the idea of all Classic realms progress through from phase 1 to, I think it's 6 now, phase 6, is that right? And creating new servers that are in phase 6 and transferring characters to those servers, I think is technologically not complicated for Blizzard to do. Whereas I would imagine creating fresh Classic servers that reprogress through the phases is something that would be complicated to do, especially when you think about the idea of, well, if new fresh servers get created, are they in the phase 1 that they were created, or are they all synced to some arbitrary start date? And you get into the idea of Classic leagues, which I think a lot of people want, similar to what Path of Exile does. Anyway, all those are interesting things, but they require design and thought and infrastructure to do. Whereas this is a minimum viable product for giving people an option to not progress, which I suppose then informally creates an option for you to create a Classic character. That didn't say that directly, but that sounds like it might be implied. Anyway, and I think what's important too is they're, like I mentioned, the profit motive. So they can charge people to clone their Burning Crusade characters over to these classic realms. So it's easy to do, and they can make some money from it. So yeah, let's do it. Otherwise, my guess is they would have offered no option, and everyone would have marched ahead to Burning Crusade.
We're going to be spending a lot of time communicating these details. So even as much detail as we're giving now, it's very high level. There's going to be a lot more detail to come. So keep an ear out.
And I want to come back to the boost thing. I haven't forgotten.
So, Pat, when's all this happening?
Oh. Soon.
Yay!
So yeah, this is something that, you know, is important to get. People are still playing through Next Rammus. We want to make sure that they have enough time to do that. But what we are looking at, this will be happening in 2021. For sure, we are committed to doing that. And what we're looking at is starting the beta rather soon. So hopefully that beta will go up and we'll get that running. The community can come and participate, help us out. We'll start to hear some feedback on the things we've talked about today. If there's any adjustments we need to make, we want to make sure we have a long enough beta period for that to happen. And then we'll get that out to the players so you can all enter the Dark Portal.
Yay!
Yeah, it's exciting.
So any final words?
Yeah, I just talked about the beta, and you know, I will say just to the community, you all have been so instrumental in making Classic the success that it has been, and you will be equally instrumental in making the Burning Crusade a tremendous success also. So please get in that beta, play, give us your feedback. We want to hear all about it. So enjoy, welcome, and let's have some fun.
Yay!
Yeah, and it's been the highlight of my professional career to work on WoW Classic and have the support and love of this community.
Oh, Brian, you
It is
sweetheart.
really special to me, and I'm really excited to be sharing this with all of you in the Burning Crusade.
Yeah, and for me, I've been playing Classic since it launched, and I wasn't working at Blizzard then, and it's changed my life, obviously. So from me and the entire WoW team, we want to thank you for bringing Azeroth to life for us. So we will definitely be seeing you in game in whatever flavor you choose. And until then, stay classic.
Stay classic. All right. We'll do Holly. I love Brian. I think Brian's the kind of guy who like has really lively D&D games and probably gives really great gifts. I bet you. He just seems like one of those guys. The guy who always brings an extra 6-pack to the BYOB. So the boost. Okay. This is important. That's why I kind of wanted to save it for last. The boost is another example of this philosophy of hearing feedback, wanting to provide access, and as a result, reducing consequence. What's the consequence? Well, if they didn't have the boost, the consequence would be anyone who wanted to play Burning Crusade would have to create a new character who hadn't played Classic. I can tell you that I have a personal opinion about this because back in 2007, when Burning Crusade released, just before it released, my WoW account got banned. I wish I could remember the details. I'm pretty sure I shared it with someone I shouldn't have and they did something dumb. But anyway, my account got banned. And so I was looking at creating a new character, which I did. I rolled a character from 1 to 70 in about 28 days, about 4 weeks. And at that time, without fast leveling guides, information, or metagaming, that burned me out so hard that I hit 70 and quit the game for months. And I didn't come back until people were working on Black Temple and Sunwell. So I guess longer than a few months. So I understand the pain of that consequence of not having a boost. And when I heard they were offering a boost, that actually gave me a little bit more of like, maybe Burning Crusade could be for me. Because for me, when I played Classic, I did what to me was kind of like a recreation of my 2005 experience, where I rolled on a PvP server because I wanted the real experience of playing WoW. And I didn't realize that open world PvP does not stand up to modern gamers. It was arguably not good back then too, but it's really not good now. And I don't really think I would want to play Burning Crusade on a PvP server, especially emerging from the Dark Portal into Hellfire Peninsula. Holy shit, what a crap show that would be. And so if I were going to play Burning Crusade, I'd rather play on the PvE server, which would mean making a new character. But knowing that I have the option of a 58 boost, suddenly it's like, oh, okay. Maybe I don't have to go through a month of leveling to actually play the game. Illender asks, not good because dead or not good because too ganky? The latter. You have both factions on a PvP server pouring through a single access point to one zone. So competition for quest mobs is going to be off the charts, unreal, unsustainable, and there's going to be PvP happening as a result if you're on a PvP server. If you're up for that, fine. But in 2021, I don't care if you have more PvP experience in World of Warcraft. And I know a lot of people don't too. But I didn't realize that till after I played through it. Anyway, but that could be my consequence, you know? And I think that there's a pretty strong argument to be made that the original iteration of WoW, WoW Vanilla Phase 1, is a game that is not actually meant to be hard. But what it is meant to do is to make you, is to reward you for your time invested. And if there's no consequence for making bad choices, the rewards for those time investments are cheapened. And I think this is where Kevin Jordan comes in. And Kevin, if you're out there, man, and you're bored one day, I would love to talk to you. I love your point of view on this. And it's so interesting to see you flummox streamers out there with what you have to say about the WoW franchise. Essentially, after listening to the voices, not in my head, well, them too, I suppose, but in the community, hearing what I think are the best, highest quality takes about these announcements, I've come to one conclusion. Blizzard is fucked. They're damned if they do and damned if they don't. Because the only way they know how to make games is to listen to feedback and to be compassionate to their players. They love their players. They created BlizzCon in the first place. They didn't have to do that. I don't think BlizzCon makes them money. Maybe I'm wrong. I could be wrong about that. But BlizzCon comes from an era of Blizzard where everyone loved the company. I know things have changed in recent years, you know, corporate gonna corporate. But I think at the end of the day, the Brian Birminghams, the Patrick Dawsons, the Holly Longdales actually do care about people playing their game and want to make them happy. And if there are any designers working on it, I think that's what they want to. And I think you have to listen to feedback, and over time, feedback is going to make its way into the game. And what it does is it suggests to me that live services games could be a flawed notion. Unless you have a strong creative visionary who can sustain it over long periods of time. I don't know, man. But Blizzard seems fucked because hashtag some changes to me seems like the same philosophy they use to get from WoW Vanilla to WoW Retail. And I think the Kevin Jordans of the world see that and they don't like it. I think everyone else sees it and likes it. Because like J. Allen Brack said, they think they want it, but they don't. I think both versions of WoW that are going to be out there, Burning Crusade and Shadowkeep, are good. They're different. I don't think that old versions of WoW stand up as well to a modern audience. And I think for that reason, like, keeping those games as games that are kind of not hard, but kind of grindy is a good spot for WoW to live. And I understand trepidation over making it a challenging game. Anyway, I've rambled enough about World of Warcraft at this point. It's a big, complicated topic. I'm sure there'll be more to say in weeks to come. To reiterate, you can't recreate Burning Crusade. Can't go home again. They're listening to feedback. Hashtag some changes. Retail was created by listening to feedback as well. Therefore, they're fucked. They're damned if they do, damned if they don't. That's where I'm at with it today. If you think I'm wrong, please let me know. I would love to be wrong about this. I really would. Okay. Next. So, I want to talk a little bit about a game that I got to play over the weekend. I haven't played it as much as a lot of folks have. But it's taken the internet by storm lately. And although it's part of a genre that I normally wouldn't pay much attention to, its success was kind of unignorable. And that game is Valheim. Let's find some B-roll. Okay. What is Valheim? Valheim is a survival crafting game. One of 1,000, right? There are so many of these. So why is Valheim sticking with people so damned hard? I played it for a few hours, like I mentioned. I've watched some people talk about it. I've talked to a few friends about it. And what I've come away with is a few things. Let's listen to this. Name right? Oh, that's me talking to my friend. You don't want to hear that. So, in any survival crafting game, there are a couple things that need to happen. Number one, the crafting has to be fantastic. Which, in Valheim, it is. I think it is. I'm not connoisseur of this genre, but the crafting system seems incredibly robust. You unlock things as you go. The way you position decorations and structures, and there are rules about beds having roofs over them and having enough load-bearing force to actually sustain higher flights of higher structures. And it just seems like there's a lot to it. And in a lot of ways, it's the part of the game that stands out the most. But I think also, to me, it's part of the game that is perhaps the least interesting. Because it's the most obvious thing. So what is less obvious about Valheim that I think makes it really work? It is strongly themed. So, a lot of survival crafting games kind of have a basic premise, and it's like, okay, you're here. Like, go not die. Think about the Arks, think about the Rusts of the world, Minecraft even. But with Valheim, as soon as you start the game, you get told a story about Viking warriors being chosen by Odin to cleanse his realm. And immediately, you're given a clear, linear motivation, which makes it very easy for people to understand how to play the game. Because in a game like Valheim, there are gameplay loops that are small and gameplay loops that are larger. And it's the sometimes it's the larger gameplay loops that you have a harder time getting solved. What else? With Valheim, combat and survival, and this is based on an early take, but my interpretation is that combat and survival kind of take a back seat to the crafting experience. So they're there, and you have to engage with them. You have to fight. You have to make sure you're fed, and there are cold and wet mechanics and a bunch of stuff I'm sure I don't even know about yet. But my overall impression from what I've seen and from what I've played and from what I've talked to people about is that Valheim puts these mechanics in as kind of a texture. They texture the experience. They don't define it. And that lets other parts of it come forward. It lets the crafting come to the front, which makes it feel very comfortable, which a lot of people really pursue, that feeling of comfort in a game. And another part of why this is able to happen, why combat and survival are able to be in the backseat, because it's not a PvP game. You're not fighting against other people. You're just fighting against the challenge laid out by the game and the environment. What else? It plays well solo, and it plays great in co-op. I think this game was probably made to be played co-op from the jump. And it seems like you can have very large parties. You'll see in the footage here in the corner that I'm playing with my buddy Maxentius. He showed me the game, and it was very clear that although I could have played it by myself, the cooperative component of it really adds a lot, especially when you're making buildings together, buildings you share, buildings that have a function. It allows the game to... Let me find a different way to say this. And because it's a survival crafting game, the pacing is relaxed enough that you have plenty of time to talk to your friends, which is something that I really love about games with some grind to them. Plenty of time to connect with people, dotted by moments of communication, engagement, challenge, things like that. Another nice thing is that your character isn't server bound, it's account bound. And if you go to a friend's server to see their house they built, your character comes in and joins their adventure. So I like that. It's good stuff. And I think that all these elements, the strong theming, the clear linear motivation, the combat and survival being allowed to take a back seat, the fact that it's made for co-op, fun solo, and that your character is persistent across servers, all add up alongside the presentation, which, although is lo-fi, is consistent and artful, to something that is fairly unique feeling in its quality and its impact. It's a really cool game, y'all, and that's coming from the perspective of someone who does not much like survival crafting games, for whom the basic core gameplay loop is not terrifically interesting. So yeah, it's $20 on Steam, and if this sounds up your alley, man, you probably owe it to yourself to check it out. But then again, if you're on the internet and you found this video, you probably know about it already. I just wanted to give my take on why I thought it succeeded where a lot of other games don't. Some of the commentary I've seen about Valheim is about how it's doing well where other, like, more expensive entries have failed. And sometimes I think that just allowing your game to be about one thing with a lot of supporting texture that works is what really makes a strong experience. Because a big part of the game isn't just what you can do, it's what players hear from the game. Because the game needs to teach players how to play it so that the players can find meaningful expression in the game. And sometimes games like this are too open-ended, and Valheim doesn't feel that way. It feels as open-ended as you want it to be. And the pacing is comfortable, and you always know what you're going to do next. And it's like Viking shit, which, you know, how can you not love that? All right. That's my take on Valheim. First impressions. Take it or leave it. All right, what's next and last is a little bit of, I'm going to admit, probably drier discussion about the business of making video games. And this is, like so many of my takes, a lay person's take. And it's going to be talking about Bungie's plans to expand and grow in the future. A little bit. I'm not going to read this whole article because it's pretty long, let's be honest. Key takeaways, though. They're increasing their space here in Bellevue, Washington. They're adding a lot more office space. They're adding an international office, which is going to be headed up by Luke Smith and Mark Noseworthy, two guys that you see a lot on Bungie's content. That they're at the forefront of their communications. They're two very community-trusted guys that they're putting on that international office. So that tells you how important that international presence is. They're bringing in people at the executive level and director level and on the board who have experience and in creative endeavors outside of video games. We're talking TV, talking movies, cinematic stuff. Bungie is, I think, finally coming out of the shell that it huddled into all the way back in 2018 when it first took that that investment from NetEase. So I'm going to connect a few things. This is what I like to do when I see announcements like this. I like to try to form a narrative and test it as a hypothesis to see if I got it right. So, some useful data points. And Destiny expansion, sorry, it's Bungie expansion in 2021. Number 1, Destiny 2 released in 2017. Okay, you know that? It had a whole bunch of problems. Initially, it did pretty well critically, and over time, it sort of tanked. In 2018, there was a $100 million investment from Chinese company NetEase. Who are NetEase? Well, they do a bunch of stuff. And they're responsible for a lot of Chinese gaming properties, my understanding. Some of the more interesting parts to Bungie's future fate would be that they handle all the localization in the China region for World of Warcraft and a bunch of Blizzard properties. So, yeah. If you're looking for a partner to help bring your game to new audiences, I mean, that's just one of the biggest ones out there. What else? In 2019, Bungie split from Activision. This is estimated to have cost up to $184 million for Bungie to buy Destiny from Activision. This is the way publisher-studio interactions work. The publisher owns the property, the studio makes it. So in order for Bungie to retain the ability to make Destiny after splitting from Activision, they had to buy it from Activision. Did it cost this much? Probably not. This is the high range of numbers that I've seen. In fact, I think if it cost closer to $100 million, it would make a lot of sense. Now, in 2020, we got a new roadmap for Destiny, which included an expansion per year for 3 years. And they introduced features and major changes to Destiny that made it easier to maintain into the future. Expansion roadmap and sunsetting, which is a bit controversial. And now we have the Bungie expansion of 2021 with a stated goal being to bring Destiny and Bungie properties into wider media. Bungie is trying to make, it looks like here, a Destiny universe. That's my take. And a new IP of some kind. Bungie's got big dreams, it looks like. And my sense of it is that the split with Activision was done by necessity because Activision wanted short-term profits out of Bungie, but Bungie wanted to make a long-term investment in creating multiple linked media properties, similar to like a Marvel Cinematic Universe, but on the video game side. Anyway, that's the take. It's a guess. I think it makes sense. And as time goes forward, we'll see if my hypothesis proves out. Oh, and that's it. That's all I have planned for this week. One of my goals was to keep this show a bit shorter, and I think we succeeded. I would love to hear from y'all what you thought about this. If you think any of my takes are way off base, or if there's something that can be added to them. My goal here is to create a discussion around the games and topics that we talk about all the time. And I really am interested in finding any way I can to raise the bar of discussion, and find more accurate, meaningful, rounded, nuanced communication. So we'll see if I pulled that off. Hopefully y'all will let me know. You can find Basement Side Weekly here on Twitch on Monday nights, twitch.tv/DeegTV, and after the fact on YouTube, youtube.com/DeegBS. I'm Deeg. This has been Basement Side Weekly. Thanks, and I'll catch you next week.